There's some new reporting that has broken since we've been on the air. It's something we've covered for years on this program, and it's happening. It can only be described as the start of a massive, much larger than expected purge at the FBI of FBI agents and officials. Many of them, in one way or another, touched the investigations into Donald Trump. Sources telling NBC News this: the Office of Acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove asked the FBI for a list of Bureau employees involved in January 6 cases, sparking panic inside the Bureau by people who fear retribution by the Trump administration amidst an ongoing purge of FBI leadership. Meanwhile, my colleague, NBC's Ken Dilanian, reports that several top FBI executives were told to resign or be fired, and that the purge includes more than 20 heads of FBI field offices, including those in Miami and Washington, D.C. Joining our coverage, former U.S. Attorney and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Harry Litman. Also joining us, NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley. Ryan, I've got your reporting in front of me, but why don't you share it with our audience?
Yeah, this is something I've been sort of chasing all day, and it's tough because there's so many, rumors and a lot of worry being spread within the Justice Department, within the FBI. So there's this community, obviously, of all of these people who worked these January 6 cases, on the FBI side, on the DOJ side. And so what we can report is that there was this request for this, list of all of these individuals who worked on January 6 cases, and that's something that the Washington field office has cooperated with thus far. The issue here is that it's such a large list, and so the question is, how are they going to figure out who they're going to be focused on and potentially targeting here, right? Because it's just so many people within the Bureau. This was the largest investigation in FBI history in terms of number of defendants. You're talking about over 1,500 defendants overall, and this touched basically every field office in the country. And some field offices were a lot more enthusiastic about these cases, frankly, than others, because there was a lot of skepticism about these cases within the Bureau. And, there was some, I think, tension between the FBI and DOJ and the Washington field office and other field offices across the country over the handling of these cases overall. And, but so I think there's a span of this, right? Because there are people who were very vaguely involved in, at one point, one January 6 case, and then there's people who were really in the weeds, and January 6 was their main focus. And I think those are the people who probably have the most to worry about in the coming days over whether or not, they're basically just going to be fired or targeted based on what we've seen at headquarters thus far and coming out of the Justice Department so far. But if you were to go after everybody who touched a January 6 case, I had one former official say that would be like 3/4 of the Bureau, basically, because a lot of people were involved with this on one stage. And remember, those cases range from those very low-level cases, sort of those misdemeanor cases that were of the most controversy, all the way up to seditious conspiracy. But the more common one was those assault on a federal officer charges that were really common, those AFO charges. And even people who were skeptical of the Justice Department's handling of those overall were behind those cases. And I think most of the American public would be too. When you have a cop getting beat by a rioter, that's something that most people say that should be something that's prosecuted by the federal government. So I think, the details are really going to matter here about who they end up focusing on, Nicole, about, as they go about sort of this ongoing purge of FBI leadership. And we'll see how far it's going to trickle down into the rank and file of the FBI.
Ryan Riley, I want to make sure I got this down as you said it. 3/4 of the Bureau touched these cases in one way or another?
Yeah, I think that was a rough estimate, right, from a former official. But when you're talking about the scope of this, right, in every field office, when you do an arrest, for example, that's a lot of people who are just involved in that arrest directly, right? So, there might be somebody who's actually handling this case, who's actually championing one case going forward. But then when you actually go to execute that arrest, you need a bunch of officials involved in that. So then, when you're talking about the paperwork here, there's a lot of names on a lot of these documents. That you're talking about the intelligence analysts who might have been involved with it as well, because obviously everything has to be turned over in discovery. So those are all names that would be required to be turned over to defense attorneys on this. And when, for example, let's take the case, one of the only ongoing cases involving a January 6 defendant who actually was convicted of plotting to murder FBI agents who investigated him. And that was a jury in Tennessee that convicted him of that separately. That case is still ongoing, although his defense attorney is representing that Donald Trump's pardon should apply to that conduct as well, even though that was conduct that was performed way after January 6th, when he plotted to murder the FBI employees. But that case, for example, just comes to mind because that involved, I remember, a large number of FBI employees. And when they turned over those documents, it was a lot of names that were associated with that, because in the discovery process, you've got to turn all of those names over. So even if there's only sort of a passing involvement in one of these cases, your name's going to be on those documents. So that list of people who were involved in January 6 cases at the FBI is really long.
Harry Litman, Kash Patel has said in a podcast, if we have it, the control room will tell me, that he wanted to turn the FBI into a deep state museum. If you wanted to do that, one of the steps you might consider is eliminating, quote, 3/4 of the Bureau that touched January 6 cases.
Yeah, that would certainly help, wouldn't it? And the timing here is a little strange when Patel hasn't been confirmed. But look, just start with breadth. It is everything that Ryan says. So if it's not 3/4, let's say it's just half. But remember, 1,500 people, they are still looking for some of them. So the possibility for one agency or another to be tagged with serving a warrant or interviewing a witness to try to find out all over the country with this investigation, the largest in DOJ history, is extreme. And by the way, if it's anything like this, the implications for us, for citizens, of 20 special agents in charge being eliminated, all the things they do, public corruption for starters, but street crime, everything. So it's a body blow to everybody in the country. But I really want to say, even if the breadth were much smaller, as it seems to be in DOJ, a single agent being fired because he or she did their job as they were supposed to do, and in fact here under the direction of the Department of Justice, is just a complete stake in the heart of what the FBI and DOJ are supposed to be about. And it's not just those who get hurt, as Ryan reported, and I've spoken to people already within the FBI. People are alarmed, completely nervous, wondering what to do. So you have a whole workforce, even if it weren't half the FBI involved, that is completely sort of frozen and paralyzed. This is so short-sighted and so damaging for public justice in general.